Today's Gemara Yevamos Daf Samuch Zayin. All the learning has been generously sponsored as an incredible schos for Shlema for Chadvalea Bas Saradina. Amir Hashem, the learning of the entire Chabura should bring Chadvalea Bas Saradina an incredible and perhaps even miraculous Yeshua and Refuah Shlema. And Amir Hashem, she should come home from the hospital very, very soon and ultimately have a complete recovery. Talmud Torah, the schos of Torah Birabim should bring Chadvalea Bas Saradina such an Refuah Shlema. As well as learning should be as well as for Hashem shall use any further Shmuel and Tila. That Talsim Echlas L'Cham Basivas Arblum Basbindel Chaim Yeshu and Malka Vashavigu Shechana B'Seich Shar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding on the bottom of Samach Vav Amibis, in the middle of a lengthy discussion that's dealing primarily with the difference between Nichsei Melog and Nichsei Soin Barzel. We learned this yesterday, Rashi in the Mishnah. Let's remind ourselves. The Nichsei Soin Barzel is an evaluation. It's written in the Shtar, in the Ksuba. It's what we would refer to nowadays as a dowry. It's evaluated, and for all intents and purposes, the husband owns the Nichsei Soin Barzel. And the question is, does he have full ownership or not? Nichsei Malog is the opposite. It's really the Ishas, it's the wives. Just the husband gets the produce, gets that which it produces, etc. So says the Gemara, Yitzah, there was a woman, about 10 lines from the bottom of some above and the base. First one line is Itzah. There was a woman, Dailali Gavra, Itz Tila de Milsa, Big Subasa. Then what do they have? The Ksuba, a fine woolen coat, was written in the Ksuba as the dowry, as the Nadanya. Shachiv, the husband was nifter. Shaklua yasmi uparsua misna. The Yisayimim came, took this coat as they assumed it was their father's, or they took it in payment, whatever the reason they did, and they spread it out over the misna, over the corpse of their dead father. Amar Rava, says Rava, Kanye Misna. The Yisayimim, the dead body, has acquired this garment, and now it has to be used as a clothing, as a shroud for the Yasam, for the father, for the deceased. Says the Gemara, 1 second. That's Rav. Amar Le Nanai, that's his name, fabulous name. Breder Rav Yosef, Breder Rava, the Rav Kana. Amar Rava told us, Amar Nachon Alochi Ki Rav Yehuda. He basking like Rav Yehuda, that when we have something that's brought into the marriage, the property remains the ownership of the wife. So why here are you basking that the Yisayimim are able to put over the dead body and it becomes the property of the dead body? Amar Le, Rav Kahana responds, explaining for the Shita of Rava, Milay Moider Rav Yehuda de Mechusar Gavaina. It's true. Rav Yehuda holds that it's the property of the wife. But Rav Yehuda holds that it has to be collected. The woman, after divorce, after death of her husband, has to go and collect the item. And therefore, since in this case, did the woman collect it? No, the opposite. The Yisayimim took it and put it over the corpse. Thereby, they were kind and will remain in that possession. Says the Gemara, and since it's lackey collection, it's considered in the husband's rishos. Says the Gemara, and the last line is the Gemara explains that Rava is l'shitasei. Rava is going according to his own reasoning. Damar Rava hektish chametz v'shechor, something a statement that we've had already in the past. These three entities, explains Rava, mafkinan minei shibud. They release the shibud from the item. And the reason being that they are also mechusar gavaina, they are lacking in collection. And now, before we get to the new Mishnah, we go back for a moment into Shitas Rav Yehuda. And what did Rav Yehuda teach us? Rav Yehuda taught us that the woman gets these Nichsei Soin Barzel. Why? The item itself, the bottom of Amid Beis, Amid Aleph yesterday, top of Amid Beis. Because Rav Yehuda says it goes Ima, because this came from the property of her father, and therefore she wants the item itself. So Amar Rav Yehuda explains, Rav Yehuda, if she brings into a marriage two items, two vessels, Be'elev zos, each one, they're together, they're worth 1,000 zos. avodim. And then what happened? They're married for, I don't know, 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And now these two items are worth 2,000 zuz. They doubled. Says Rabbi Yehuda, she takes one of them in repayment of the ksuba, because now one of them is the value of two. Originally, two are 1,000, now two are 2,000. So she takes one of these items in payment of her ksuba. And the other one, she's allowed to give cash and take it as well. Why? Because it's the prestige of her father's house. This is really an extension of the din that we saw yesterday. Yesterday we saw that the woman retains ownership of the item itself. Now Rabbi Yehuda is teaching us that even if the item went up in value, and therefore right now she doesn't really get both, she only gets one, she's allowed to say, I want the other item, I see it's a valuable commodity, and I'll pay you cash in its stead. My Kamashlan says, the Gemara, why is the Chiddush? Tidava. This was the din of Rabbi Yehuda, that the property of her father's household is hers. You already taught us. So what's the chiddush over here? Explains the Gemara, you would have thought, you would have thought if she's taking the item in payment of her ksuba, that's what she could take it. But you would have thought for her to say, I got one item, one vessel for my ksuba, and the other item I want, and I'll give you the cash. I would think maybe that you cannot do, as we explained. Kamash Mulan, that's the second level chiddush of Yehuda. Even the second item, she's allowed to pay. Now, says the Gemara, we're going to go continuing this theme of Barzel, Va'avodim, the slaves that a woman brings into her marriage, evaluates in the ksuba, and the husband gets somewhat ownership of them, as Barzel says the Mishnah. Bas Yisrael shenisis l'koyin. We have a Bas Yisrael that marries a koyin, umeis, and her husband, the koyin, dies. V'nicha me'uberes. She is pregnant. So now the big discussion over here is she is pregnant. The uber, the fetus cannot, let's look at Rashi, second narrow line. V'yesh lo uber ben chelek, and the fetus is a Yerush, is an inheritor. So the fetus gets a portion in the estate. Part of this estate are avad. So the uber gets the portion, ve'ein le'uber koyach la'achilam b'tshuma, and the uber cannot feed the tshuma. So the question over here is, we discussed yesterday, does the marriage allow the avadim to eat tshuma? Now we're going to the next step. The marriage is no longer, the husband died. If there are children left over, as Rashi points out, then of course, male children, boys, they inherit the father, they are kohanim, and they can continue feeding the avodim truma. The question is, what if she is pregnant? What is that status? Because the uber, the unborn fetus, is considered to have partial ownership, and that partial ownership cannot feed away chuma. Can these avodim eat chuma? So says the Mishnah, lo yachlu avadah b'chuma. They're not allowed to give the avodim chuma mimnei chelkai shel uber, because the chelek, the uber, has a portion. Therefore, you cannot feed the avodim. Shal uber paisel v'inay meichel divrei Rav Yosef. He says the uber himself is pasul from eating chuma. The uber itself, disqualifies others from eating chuma v'inay meichel, and it does not allow them to eat truma. Amru loy, the Chacham responded to Rabbi Yosef, now that you taught us this din, by Bas Yisrael that marries a koyin, say the Chachamim, even if she was a Bas koyin, so she her whole life ate truma, and her husband's a koyin and he dies, and now she's pregnant, she still, the avodim cannot eat truma. Why? Because Lamaisa, the Ober, the unborn fetus, has a portion in the estate, and the Ober cannot give away Chuma to the people, even though this Ober's mother might be a Kayin, which is the second Chiddush that the Gemara is about to discuss right now. So says the Gemara, why? Where did Rav Yosef get his din? That if the mother's a Yisrael, the Ober disallows the Avodim from eating. Is the reason that the Ober has the status of its mother, so the Ober is called a Yisrael, and therefore doesn't get Truma. I don't know, Yolod Meichel, Sheino Yolod Eino Meichel. Or there's a din about feeding truma to avodim. If you're yulud, if you're a born person, you can give away the truma. But an unborn fetus, a baby in the mommy's womb, cannot give away truma. So fundamental shayla, what is the detail that tells Rabbi Yosi that if she is pregnant, the avodim cannot eat truma? Says the Gemara, L'mayna Afkamino, who cares? Two cases. Lo'obar b'mei koyanes. Says the Gemara, one case, if the mother is a koyanes, so if the reason is that this obar, the fetus, has the status of the mother, just like the mother's a koyan, the obar is a koyan, and then you could, yes, feed the avadim. If it's because an unborn entity, by the very nature of it, cannot feed truma, even if the mother is a koyan. So what is the din? Explains the Gemara of a machlekes am Rabbi in the time of the Rabbi Yosi. You know what Rabbi Yosi's reasoning is? The Kasav Ober Mei Zara Zaru. But of course, if the mother was Kohen, then Rabbi would agree that you could, yes, feed the Avadim. Rav Yosef Amar, no, Yulan Meichel, Sheino Yulan Eino Meichel. Has to do with being born or not. So Machlik is a Rabbi and Rav Yosef in the understanding of Rav Yosi in our Mishnah. So Meisvei asked the Gemara and Rav Yosef, Amar Lo Rav Yosi in the Mishnah, the Chacham is that to Rav Yosi, Me'ach, Shahadat Alan Abasi Salakoin Bas Koyin, the Koyin Ma'u. What did the Chachamim say? You taught us that in about Abbas Yisrael, what about Abbas Koyin? Amr Lahem, and what did Rav Yosi respond? So the Brisa fills in details that we don't necessarily have in the Mishnah. Amr Lahem, Rav Yosi responds, Zu Shamati, Zu Lo Shamati, I don't know. I never heard the din in this case of Abbas Koyin Likoyin. So explains the Gemara now, beautiful Raya. If the detail that disallows the feeding of the servants after the husband dies is because the fetus is unborn, irrelevant to the status of the mother. Now I understand Rav Yosi's answer. I never heard the din. But if the whole reason you're not feeding is why, the reason is because you're not a yilud, you're a fetus, you're not born. What does Rav Yosi mean? I don't know that din. It's the same din. It's the same exact case. They're both cases of an unborn fetus, and we don't care about the mother because the reason why you don't feed it is because it's an unborn fetus. So proves the Gemara must be not like Rav Yosef's understanding, but rather Rabba's understanding. Says the Gemara, kasha, that is indeed a kasha on Rav Yosef. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. We're holding about 25 lines to the bottom of the Amid. The first one in line is kasha. Says the Gemara, someone who argues on Rav Yosi. What did Rav Yosi say in the Mishnah? We have the Sayin Barzal Avodim. If the woman is pregnant, the fetus disallows these Avodim from eating Truma because the Ober has a portion in the estate. Says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel, Zudavi Rav Yosi. Avachacham Aimrim Yesh Leibanim Eichlim. Yesh Leibanim Eichlim. Misham banim, ein loy banim, eichlim mishamachim, ein loy achlim, eichlim misham mishpacha, kula. Says the Chachamim, I disagree. Say the Chachamim, if there are other children, they get to feed the Avadim. If there are not other children, there are brothers, they get to feed the Avadim. If not, there's the entirety of the family. So says the Chachamim, it's not the fetus, the Obar, does not disallow then from feeding the avadim that are tzayin barzel truma. Says the Gemara, that was Rav Yehuda Rav Shmuel. Zu v'lo yisirlei. It sounds like if you go up 5 lines, Rav Yehuda Shmuel zu divrei Rav Yosi. It sounds like they're saying this is the opinion. But it sounds like Rav Yehuda Shmuel himself does not hold like Rav Yosi, and sounds like he holds like the Chachamim. Amar lei Shmuel Rav Chana Bagda Paik Aisilei Be'asara Deima L'Chaban Vayam Zeklo Barkana. But we know a statement from Shmuel in which he said that in reality, the Ober could make a kinyan. Seemingly, he's holding like Rav Yosi. Ella explains the Gemara Zu Visvir Lei. This is Rav Yosi, and we agree with him. My Kamash Malon. So what's the chiddush of Shmuel? The Pligi Rabbanan Lei Rav Yosi that the Rabbanan disagree. Says the Gemara, really? Umi Pligi? Do the Rabbanan really disagree? Masa Rav Zakai asks Rav Zakai Zu Eidos Heid Rav Yosi Mishmai Zatalyon. Rav Yosi said his did in the Mishnah that the existence of the Ober of the unborn fetus gives him a portion of the estate, thereby disallowing the Avadim from eating. And Shemai Vatalion V'Haidalai. And they admitted to Rav Yosi Amar Ravashi mikatani v'kibloi v'haideloi katani. He just said v'haideloi. They admitted dimistaver time. I understand what you're saying. There's two ways that someone could say, I'm asking. I hear what you're saying. You're saying something beautiful. Or I'm asking that I really believe what you are saying, that you are correct. Says the Gemara, those are the two reasons how you would learn the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, now we're going to go into a new topic for the rest of the day. Says the Gemara, we have a brisa. The brisa is going to begin with Rabbi Yossi and then give us some other dinim. If the kohen dies and leaves over children, both the nichsei malug and the nichsei sayin barzel avadim, going back to yesterday's discussion, both eat shuma. You have both. Av the malug eichling there she acheles, av the sayin barzel eichlim nechal gushal over. Shavar paisal v'inoy meichel divir Rabbi Yossi, like we saw in the Mishnah, the Uber disallows the feeding of the Truma to the Avadim. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi Omer. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi continues and he teaches Mishamav v'Abbas ma'acheles habeneinu mechel. New din. If there are daughters left over, then the Avadim could eat Truma. If there are sons left over, then they cannot eat Truma. Rav Shimon bar Yochai Omer zecharim yochelu kulam. The kevas yochelu. If there are male children, says Rashbi, then the avadim could eat, but if all of the children, if they're kulam nekevais, I don't know if I read it right, zacharim yochelu, kulam nekevais, then lo yochelu. Why? Again, we're talking about a case of pregnancy, and if there's only surviving daughters, we have to be concerned that maybe she'll give birth to a boy, and then the boy will inherit everything, and anything at all. So says the Gemara, my Arya, what do you mean? Shem Yimsa Ober Zachar Tebukle in a keva nami basla. Why don't you just tell me very simply that in a keva disqualifies never meaning truma? Why do you have to go and have anything to do with the Ober? Says the Gemara, you're right. Chada void katani kamar. 3 lines to the bottom. Chada, reason number 1, you can't feed avodim truma in a keva nami basla. Void, and furthermore, Shem Yimsa Ober Zachar in the bottom is makamah ben klum. So 2 different reasons why you cannot feed the avodim the truma. So let's go back to the first dinner of Shimon Yochai, and says the Gemara zacharim yechelu. If there are male children, then the slaves can eat truma. Says Mar, really? What about the over? What about the unborn fetus? Explains the Gemara Kasavar, turning over to Samach Zayin and Mebeis. What does Rashbi hold? Ein chayshin lemiyuta. Rishim Bar Yochai is not worried about a miyut. We're not worried about that maybe the child born will be a girl, because maybe it'll be a boy, number 1, and number 2, maybe there'll be a miscarriage. So it's a miyut, it's a minority to tell us that maybe it'll be a girl. Never says Rashbi, we're not worried about that. Second way of learning, really we are concerned about the miyut. But you know what we do? We do it takana like Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, which is what? What happens when the Yisayimim come to divvy up the estate of their father? Bezdin ma'amidam apatrabis. Bezdin appoints a trustee of Bezdin ubaralem b'chilek yaf and ensures that everyone gets their appropriate portion. Hey, do you want to get all of your chaylim limchais? So says the Gemara. So too in our case, what we're going to do is we're going to give the unborn fetus a piece of land, and therefore, even if it becomes a zachar, even if the baby, even if it's a nekeva, still will not mess up the avodim from eating, because she's not going to get a portion because they're going to give her land on the side. Of course, if we didn't speak out clearly, the issue over here is that the ober, the unborn fetus, is going to have a portion, a right, a piece of the pie of the avodim, of the slaves. A different discussion that we'll get to, Hashem, that says Rav Nachman, I can't allow someone to protest afterwards because then Bezdin looks like it is meaningless. Rav Nachman says the Gemara, let's go and let's understand. Is this din of Rav Nachman a din which is a machlekes Tanaim? Sounds like it is. Says the Gemara, they're not arguing in Rav Nachman. They're arguing in Rav Chayshish for the minority. Going back to the Bryce on the bottom of Amud Aleph, says Yishmael bar Rav Yosi, the daughters, if they leave over daughters, then they are allowed to feed them truma. If it's children, sons, then they do not. Says Gemara, Maishna ben Deloy Michael. Let's understand this thing. Perhaps something that people were bothered when we read it fast on the bottom of Amud Aleph. But the Gemara now explains, what is the reason that if there are other sons, that the Avadim do not get to eat the Truma if there's also a pregnant, if she's also pregnant? Because the Uber has abortion. So I asked the Gemara, I don't understand. The Bas Nami, the daughter also what does the difference be? Why don't we say that the Uber has a portion in this estate? The Uber has, the fetus has an ownership in the slave, and that's why the slave can't eat truma. Irrelevant if the other inheritors are boys or girls, banim or daughters, banis. Amar Abaye explains Abaye about 15 lines down. The first one line is Abaye halcha b'nechasim muatim askinan and ukimta. The case is, there's a very small part of the estate that was left over, and that very small part of the estate is going to go directly to the girls, because we don't want the girls to have to beg for food. And the case is that there's a boy together with the girl, and now, so the din is that the daughters inherit this little bit of an estate, and now, therefore, we're not worried about the unborn fetus. Again, because there's only a little estate, and there's a boy and a girl left over, and the mommy bear is pregnant, the girl gets that little piece of the estate, and now the fact that she is pregnant doesn't factor into the equation. Why not? Explains the Gemara. If she eventually gives birth to a son, this kid is not going to get anything more than the son that's alive. And the son that's alive got nothing. Why did the son get nothing? The son got nothing because the daughter got everything. Therefore, says the Gemara, Ibasi, and if it's a girl that is born, why would she get anything of the estate? But the Kanterabanan, it's all the Kanaderabanan that we give the estate when there isn't a large estate to the daughters. The Takana is obviously only on people born and not on people that are unborn. So says the Gemara, if we say that the case is there's only a small estate, then we'll have no questions. But ask the Gemara, you're designing a case that the case has to be it's a small estate. But says the Gemara, you must take a look at the end of the Brisa, says Shem Yimso Ober Zachar Vein Labanais B'Makom Ben Klum. So what does it sound like? Says the Gemara, sounds like Adarabba, the opposite. Nechasim muatim debanais nenu. Why are you telling me that the sons don't get anything in the place of the daughters? Excuse me. The Brisa says the daughters don't get anything in the place of the sons. The exact opposite. If it's only nechasim muatim, then it goes all to the daughters. Says the Gemara, you're right. To make another ukim to the seifas and nechasim merubim. This end of the Brisa is going about there's a lot of possessions. The beginning of the Brisa is about small possessions, and that's going to be the way of learning up the Brisa. And we conclude to get to the Mishnah, says the Gemara, on the din that we just said, we just took for granted that when there's the Chasim Muatim, it goes to the daughters. Ask the Gemara, the Chasim Muatim, the Banis, they knew. Is that true? That if the assignment come and sell part of the estate, they're allowed to. So obviously it doesn't go straight to the daughters. Says the Gemara, Bas, Tikatani, what does it mean, daughters? An interesting shot that when the Brisa said daughters, you know what it meant? It meant the mother. Says Mariachi, I know Rav Yosi, it's the same thing. Says the Gemara, so it comes out very, very fascinating that when it says banim and banais, it does not mean sons and daughter. Rather, what does it mean? When it says bas, it refers to aim, the mother. And the reason that you're going to be able to feed truma is because the nechsei malog get truma. Whereas when it says that there is banim, there are sons, that's referring to the nechsei saying barzel, that they do not eat truma. And the Gemara says that there's two opinions, Kula Rav Yishmael Rav Yesi, the entire Brisa. Let's just begin by learning the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Ha'ober, Va'yavam, Va'irisin, Va'cheresh, V'antisha Shanim, all of these people, the unborn fetus, the Yavam, one who did Irisin, Ha'cheresh, Adamud, V'antisha Shanim, Yamachas, one who's 9 years old in one day, Paislin, V'loim Achilim. All of these people are not allowed, do not feed, they make other people unable to eat Truma, and as well, they do not allow someone to eat Truma. Safik, Shubantisha Shanim, Yamachas, Safik Shein, excuse me. Savik Shubentish, son of Yamachas, Savik Sheinoi. Savik Hevi is Cyrus, Savik Shalai Hevi. In these two cases, it's the same thing as well. They do not feed off Truma. Neofal Abai is a love Albas, a case which we've seen already. Many days when Risha Vidal died first, or Rasa Chaletzam Zebem, then you need Chalitza and not Yibam. We'll pick it up from the Gemara Mirta Hashem in the next year.